Welcome into a Monday edition of Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery. Today on the show, how much can the Falcons improve their running game? Do we really want DeAndre Ayton here? And the Braves have first world problems right now. We'll talk about all of that. It's Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery on Locked On Sports Atlanta.
This is Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
Welcome into this Monday edition of Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. We ask you to head over to youtube.com, put Locked On Sports Atlanta into your search browser, find our page, subscribe, leave us a comment. We are also free and available on all of your favorite podcast platforms, Spotify, Odyssey. Find us there, leave us a 5-star review, and you can follow me on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. So, Falcons take another step last week as OTAs wrap up. Now we get into mandatory minicamps. And about a week or so ago, we talked about the league average in passing in the NFL and where and can the Falcons be and all of that. Let's take a look at running the football because obviously Arthur Smith coming from a team and a franchise that was a very heavy run first offense. Now, that makes things a lot easier when you have Derrick Henry, a 2,000-yard running back, in the backfield. And then you've got guys like Taylor Lewan and Jack Conklin that were all there when they had an outstanding offensive line, probably a top 5 offensive line in the NFL. That makes life a lot easier when it comes to running the football. So last year, when you look at some of the stats on the Atlanta Falcons, as far as rushing attempts go, the Falcons were 29th in the NFL in rushing attempts. Only 3 teams ran the ball less times than the Falcons. The Falcons were 31st in rushing yards. Only one team, the Texans, ran it for less yards than the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons were 27th in rushing touchdowns. So only 5 teams had fewer rushing touchdowns than the Falcons. And then one of the big ones is the Falcons were 30th in the NFL in yards per attempt at 3.7 yards. Now, to give you an idea, the Falcons ran it 393 times last year for 1,451 yards. The average team in the league last year, average team, ran it 453 times for 1,959 yards and 16 touchdowns. So you can see that the Falcons were below average in all of those statistics. So can the Falcons' running game improve? Well, one is I do think that 393 number is going to come up and get closer to the 453 mark. In fact, it might even surpass that. Not really a surprise when you think about the quarterback play. You don't have Matt Ryan. And again, this offense was always going to be a heavy throw first offense as long as Matt Ryan was here. If you have Matt and Julio and Ridley and this and that, then you're always going to throw the football a lot more. You have to run the football effectively, but you're always going to throw it a lot more. So I expect the rushing attempts to go up. The big question in my mind will be not so much the yards, but the yards per attempt. When you're averaging less than 4 yards an attempt in the NFL, and just again, take the average in the NFL, 4.3 yards. Even if the Falcons go from what they ran last year, 393, up to the 453, you're talking about almost 300 extra yards of offense at the end of the day in the running game, just running it at league average distance, 4.3 yards per attempt compared to the 3.7 that the Falcons ran. Can the Falcons be better on their offensive line to do that? I don't know. That's the $64 million question, isn't it? And that's why the offensive line battle is going to be such a big storyline going into training camp and watching through training camp and what they do. We expect them to make some moves on the line of scrimmage. Arthur Smith already said, last week at OTAs that, hey, we're not done with our roster and we're evaluating wide receivers now so that we can look to add guys in the trenches when we get toward training camp. So I expect the Falcons, just by attrition, to be a better run team. So I expect their attempts to go up. The yards will most likely go up. But how much more can the Falcons improve in their yards per attempt? And I think that's the key. If you're not running it for at least 4 yards a carry in the NFL, you're really not going to be able to run the football effectively. And I've talked about this a lot over the years about how our philosophy at times and our inability to run the football has been on 3rd and 2, which should open up a lot of your playbook. There's a whole cavalcade of plays that you should be able to run and call, but we haven't been able to do that. It's been shotgun, 5 wide, empty backfield, because you can't trust your running game. And you can't trust, with all due respect, the guys opening up holes out front. And when you look at where this group of running backs is going to be come training camp, if we think about it like this, you probably carry at least 4 running backs and a fullback, right? Okay, well, Keith Smith's your fullback, so you know that's pretty well said. And if you've got 4 additional running backs, well, they just moved Avery Williams, the running back, so he's going to make the team. Tyler Algier, the kid that they drafted out of BYU, he's going to make the team. He's a draft pick. He's going to make the team. And Cordell Patterson is going to make the team as a running back. So you might only have one spot that you're talking about. And is that Williams or the other kid they signed from Tennessee or Kadri Allison? Okay, well, with all due respect, I mean, those aren't exactly, that's not exactly Derrick Henry and Adrian Peterson and guys like that in their prime. We're talking about, ham and eggers and, humanoids and, jamokes that are, competing for that one spot. So I look at the depth of running back, for the Falcons, and I say, oh, okay. I mean, how much more are you going to push, a Cordell Patterson in this offense? He's not a guy that can run it 250 times in an NFL season. He's just not built like that. If you run him 250 times or more in an NFL season, he'll be broken in half. It's not what he's designed to do. He's designed to be an alternative. And yes, he led this team in carries last year, but that doesn't make it a good thing. I understand the year that they got out of him, but he gives you a lot more dimension in your passing game as a running back coming out than necessarily he lines up and runs it between the tackles or tries to get around to the outside. It's just not the game that you want to play with Cordell Patterson. So again, I think that just attrition tells you that they won't throw it as often. They're not going to throw it close to 600 times with these quarterbacks. They're going to have to power run the football, and that's what they want to describe their running game is power run. But how are you going to do that with your offensive line? And this is where it becomes critical that you have to get that evaluation process right. That's where you can't play any favorites, and that's why I don't care if Jalen Mayfield is a 3rd-round draft pick. If he can't handle the job, you have to replace him. I don't care if Matt Hennessy was or was not drafted by this. He wasn't drafted by this regime, but he is a draft pick. I don't care. If he can't handle it, you got to do something with him. If Caleb McGarry is not capable to play right tackle and he's your 1st-round draft pick from a few years ago, and I understand this regime didn't draft him, but even as a 1st-rounder, if that means he can't start, then he can't start. Because you're not going to change up the dynamic of your running game until you get that offensive line fixed. And the Falcons, look, you hope Tyler Algier is a guy who can come in and do some things. But again, you're asking a rookie running back to carry the load. That's not going to happen. That's not going to be reality of what this team is going to do. Patterson's going to have to be your lead guy. You hope that Williams or Allison or somebody shakes out, in that mix. Avery Williams is not going to line up in the eye behind Keith Smith and run it through. Avery Williams is being designated as a running back so that they can clear up another spot in their cornerback room. So that you don't have to trot him out of cornerback, but he's your punt and kick returner. So you don't have a lot of competition at running back, with all due respect. I mean, yeah, you got one spot that you got to figure out and find, but it ain't like you've got all pros lined up to take that spot. And unless they fix their offensive line, I don't know how much more that 3.7 is going to change. I don't think that they are suddenly going to become a team that you can look at and they're going to average 4.5 yards a carry. And that's, when you talk about the elite rushing teams in the NFL, there are a handful of teams that, 3, I guess, that run it for over 5 yards a carry. But, there's a group of teams that when you start talking about, 4.5 or more yards a carry, that gets you in the top 10. If you can be a 4.5 yards per carry offense in the NFL, you'll be a top 10 running team. But I think the Falcons have a lot of questions. And this, again, goes back to what is our offensive identity? Well, if they want to be a power running team, they got a lot of things they got to fix up front first. All right, when we get back, do we want DeAndre Ayton here for the Hawks? No. Let's talk about that next. Hitting Hard with Jon Chuckery on Locked On Sports Atlanta.